Welcome back to Evil Kitty Music Presents. Hey everybody, thanks for coming back. I'm your host Keith, and this is the only channel where you get to see me teaching you songs that I wrote that you've probably never heard of and probably don't care about. But we're going to do it anyway, and it's going to be a good time. Today I'm going to talk about the song that was probably the closest I ever had to a hit single. It's a song called Try that I wrote and performed with the band Evil Kitty. We're going to do three things. I'm going to show you the song and talk about the inspirations behind the song and other music and other bands that inspired the song. We're going to tell a couple good anecdotes around the bands and the stories behind the song. And just for fun, I'm going to irritate a good friend of mine by talking about a band that I know he really hates. So, just to get started, let me play a clip of the track we're going to be talking about today. Again, it's a song called Try I wrote. And what I did is put together some live footage of the band actually performing the song. But underneath it is the actual studio recording of it, because the audio quality of the live clip wasn't great. So without further ado, here is Try. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Hopefully you saw that it was a really good band that we had, and the singer is fantastic. And if anything you learned from my last video is bad singing, namely mine, can tank songs completely. And thank God Sue is a great singer. She's a great front person. She was the ideal singer for our band. So Sue, if you're watching, wishing you the best. Hope you're doing well. So let's talk about the song itself. Let's start with the opening riff, and it starts with a D chord and goes a little something like this. So where did I come up with that riff? You know, as a musician, you always kind of wonder that yourself. And it was something I came up with many, many years ago. And thinking back, if I had to take a guess where it came from, it would have come from another popular song on the radio at that time. And it was by a band called Sixpence None the Richer. They had a hit single called Kiss Me. Different chord progression. It's based around a C shape, but because we're putting the capo on the 3rd fret, it's actually around an E flat shape. A little music theory. Sorry, had to get out of the way. And their song goes like this. Just kind of a descending version of a chord. And I think if you listen to the opening riff of Try, you're going to get that kind of similar vibe. And best of my knowledge, that's where that came from. So, interesting anecdote number 1. Years after I wrote this song and Evil Kitty was not performing anymore, I had moved away from New York. my mother, my wife, and I were visiting Nashville, and we were told we had to visit this musical venue called the Bluebird Cafe. This is a really, really small venue where musicians come in, usually acoustic, sometimes electric, but low-level electric, and perform. And it's just one of these most intimate settings to see a show. So we got there early. We waited online for hours because if you didn't have tickets, they only set so many aside. And as you can see in the photo, I was so close I could touch the performer. Well, that performer in front of me that I'm almost touching is Lee Nash. Lee Nash happens to be the lead singer for Sixpence None the Richer. She did kind of sing a little bit of Kiss Me in that show because the other artists that were there were kind of goading her into doing it, even though I don't think she intended to. Most of the material that she was playing that night was off one of her solo albums, which was much darker, much more depressing type music. Very good, a great show. So you might also recognize the gentleman in the black shirt to the far right in the photo. That's Jace Everett. Jace Everett wrote a hit song called Bad Things, which you may remember from HBO's hit show True Blood, and goes something like... Anyway, I thought that was a fun story. So moving on to the chorus of the song. So for the chorus of the song, that was written much later than the opening riff or the verse riff of the song. Sometimes as a musician, you'll have a piece of music and it'll be sitting with you for a long time because you just don't know what to do with it. And you don't want to rush it because you want to make sure that whatever you do end up fitting with it fits perfect and it becomes a great song, rather than taking a great idea and rushing it and potentially ruining the song by just throwing something together. So this was something I had for many years. And when I went back to try to finish the song, there was a local band playing where we played in New York called Shibuti. This band was just packing in the people just dying to see them. And my brother, I know, was a big fan of theirs. So fast forward a little bit, and I decided I was helping out, volunteering to organize a charity event called Guitars for Life, where we brought in a whole bunch of musicians to donate their time, raised a lot of money for a person who is in desperate need of medical bills. So we got Shibuti to come play. My band, Evil Kitty, also played that show, fun fact. And the members of Shibuti actually helped us load and unload our gear for the show. I know you're like, why is that interesting at all? Well, because the day of that show, Shibuti showed up and decided they were no longer going to be called Shibuti anymore. They had changed their name, which is kind of crazy because when you're already kind of the big name, why would you want to change your name? But they did, and I think it worked out for them because they ended up getting signed to a record deal, and the name of their new band was Coheed and Cambria. Anybody there who doesn't know Coheed and Cambria, you can look them up. They've played Rock in Rio. They opened for Iron Maiden. They kind of became a bit of a big deal. I do have a good friend of mine who can't stand them, so I'm sure even spending this much time on them is probably irritating him, and he's probably going to call me a whole bunch of rude names. Just be kind to me in the comments, Greg, please. So Coheed and Cambria, they write their songs in some very staccato riffing. I'm going to try to play a version of their song called Everything Evil, which is off their first album, and it goes something like... something like that. But the basics of it is the staccato phrasing. And that was what I took for the chorus of Try, because that was the popular type of music. So I said, well, let me try to do something staccato playing. Of course, I did it with a little bit of a more distorted tone. So my version of the Coheed and Cambria staccato playing would go something more like this. And that is the chorus for Try. So before we move on to the solo section of the song, I want to talk about how close this was to a hit single. And I joke, for anybody who watched the premiere episode of the show, we talked about how a lot of bands use a certain chord progression and how many of those become hit songs. And that was your E, your B, your C sharp, and your A. So that would be your... Well, if you're following along with the chorus to Try, you'll notice we had 3 of those 4 chords in a different order. You had the B, we had the A, didn't have the C sharp because we went to a G instead, and then of course we also had the E. So if I had just replaced the G with a C sharp, I may have had a hit single, 1 chord away. But it really doesn't work with the C sharp, because if I'd done it with a C sharp, it would sound like this. Not really the same feel, so I'm happy with my choices. However, technically, by the music master formula, I was 1 chord off from what would be considered the chord progression of a hit song. So let's move on to the solo sections of the song. Let me just play a clip from the live/not live to kind of show you the guitar solo of the song. All right, so I'm not going to show you the whole solo, but there's 2 sections of the solo I wanted to talk about because knowingly or unknowingly, I think I had some pretty big famous influences on that. The opening of the solo, which if you'll notice goes something like... I think I took inspiration from one of the greatest guitar players of all time, Steve Vai. He has a song off his Passion and Warfare album called I Would Love To, which goes something like... So when the lead for that song comes in, it goes... If you look at what I played and what he played, they don't sound the same, but they do use most of the same notes. Really 1 note off, just like my 1 chord off being a hit. The solo is really 1 note off what he plays, but in a different pacing and in a different fingering, obviously. So where he's doing, I'm doing... So the big difference between the descending part of the scale is I'm using the 5th fret, like the G scale, and he's using the 6th fret, more in the C sharp vein, which is, the hitmaker scale. So that's why his song is better than mine. Because what I'm doing is... where he's doing... Anyway, I hear the similarities, not sure if you do, but that is my Steve Vai influence in Try. So now, to the second half of the guitar solo, we move from Steve Vai to an even bigger icon in the rock and metal scene. I'm talking, of course, about the godfather of heavy metal, Ozzy Osbourne. And the song, of course, is Crazy Train. And it's really not Ozzy Osbourne per se. It's really his amazing guitar player, Randy Rhoads, one of the best who's ever played. He not only had the iconic riffs and the technical ability to play fierce guitar solos, but he also made them melodic and memorable and musical in their own right. And that's where I got the inspiration for this part of the solo, where the music ramps up and I needed to get into something fast. I borrowed from a passage from the Crazy Train solo that goes something like this. Now, I didn't play that whole section. All I did was borrow the trilling pattern. Rather than playing it on the 14th fret the way Randy does, I move it down to the 12th and 15th position and just do a quick trill like. And there you have it. Try by Evil Kitty. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope the stories were entertaining. I hope you learned something from the tab and the playing. And hopefully it inspires you to write something yourself. So I think we accomplished everything we set out. Number one, I showed you guys how to play Try by Evil Kitty. We had some fun stories and anecdotes around the bands and inspirations behind the songs. And I think we irritated my poor friend Greg with references to Coheed and Cambria. Sorry, Greg. But I'll make it up to Greg later, because eventually I'm going to break down a song that we're working on together, which will also bring back I Would Love To by Steve Vai. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, don't forget to like and subscribe down below. Leave any comments as to what you liked, what you didn't like. And most importantly, if you're a local artist or band, please put your link to your band site down there so that everybody else can check you out and support the local scene the way I did with Shibuti. So going back to the local brotherhood, wish Claudio and the boys well. Not that they need much of my help. They're kicking butt opening for Iron Maiden, so obviously they did something more right than me. Maybe if you look at some of their songs, they used the hit progression that I talked about in the first episode. So anyways, until next time, rock on.